My name is Sam Mercer, and the morning it all started, a neighbor's car clipped my trash can like it was on purpose 3 knocks, like someone testing me, and everything small about that street got louder. You don't wake up planning to be the person who builds a concrete bin, but you also don't wake up wanting to pick up somebody else's mess for the 5th week straight while they smile and pretend it was an accident. So I made a choice that sounds ridiculous. I built a trash can that couldn't be moved. We lived on Oak Hollow, a street that prides itself on order-trimmed hedges, matching mailboxes, an HOA that gives rules the dignity of scripture. Across the road was Evelyn Hart, HOA president, a woman who said curb appeal matters the way some people say grace. Her car brushed my bin, and she didn't blink. She'd arrive at meetings with her pin on, and there was a kind of power in how she treated small things as big deals. I tried the patient route. I moved the can. I bought sturdier lids. I left a note. Please be careful, Sam's trash. It sounded petty later, I know, but it was me trying to be human. Monday after Monday, the same pattern. Dented plastic, strewn garbage, me gathering pieces. There was a day I remember exactly, coffee in my hand, the sound of plastic collapsing into itself, and the cold drop of realizing she wasn't going to notice. Anger wasn't cinematic, it was practical. I'm tired, I thought. I'm tired of being the one who cleans what other people break. I started reading the bylaws out of curiosity and stubbornness. There was language about aesthetics and approved materials, words that could mean anything, but nowhere did it forbid durable receptacles. So I did something dull and obsessive. I made a concrete can. I painted it forest green to match other bins. I welded rebar into the base so it wouldn't crack. I smoothed the finish so it didn't scream, "Look at me." It just sat there, stubborn and useful. The build took nights. My hands learned to hold a trowel the way a guitar player learns to hold notes, and there was a sort of humility in the repetition, mixing, pouring, smoothing, waiting. Mark from across the street would bring coffee and ask how it was going, like a man checking on a slow, private miracle. Elise, my lawyer friend, kept telling me not to make it personal and kept laughing when I tried to explain how important it felt. You want to fix a problem you didn't break, she said, and that felt like both criticism and comfort. The first garbage truck lifted it like any other can. A small victory, almost invisible. Evelyn sent a letter calling it a hazardous obstruction, and the HOA fined me for upsetting the street's look. I put the notice on the fridge like a grim achievement. People started to notice. Phones came out. Someone caught it when Evelyn's car clipped the thing, and the metal made a sound like an offended beast. No roll, no give. A crew came with a notice to remove the can. They wrapped chains around the base and tried to lift. The hydraulics shuddered. The arm slipped. There was a moment where the crowd held its breath, neighbors on porches, kids leaning on fences. I didn't intend to be a spectacle, but when they tried to haul it away, I wrapped a chain around my waist and hooked it to the bin. It's dramatic, I know, but it was practical. If they were going to take it, I'd rather go with it than pretend I hadn't warned them 100 times. They called the police. The officer who read the papers looked tired and steady. She sat on the back of her cruiser for a second, hat tipped, and asked me, why? Not to be clever, but to ask how a man ends up chained to a can. I told her, because I got tired of being the one who fixes other people's mistakes. She sighed and said, you could have come to a meeting. I thought about that, about the meetings where I felt small, about the way authority sounds polite until it isn't. I let them cuff me because there was a dignity to choosing your own small defeat over a scene you can't control. The footage of a man in cuffs and a chain is funny until you realize it's a person who felt he had no other option. The footage of me in cuffs hit the news, and then something larger, and the tone changed. A ridiculous image became, for strangers, a question about fairness. People began to come by with stories not to mock, but to share the little things that had been building up. Rosa told me about a fence a builder never fixed. Jamal talked about how the city's pickup schedule made him feel invisible. A retired teacher explained what it felt like to be reprimanded for a paint color. These were small indignities stitched together. The concrete can was just the last visible stitch. The legal back and forth was exhausting. Certified letters, a demand to submit to aesthetic review, threats of fines stacking like small bricks. Elise spent evenings drafting appeals while I learned to document everything. Dates, times, photos, the exact cadence of how Evelyn's car would drive by. The neighborhood chat filled with hot takes and private messages. Some accused me of showboating. Others started a petition that gathered signatures in days. A video of the failed removal attempt spread online. Strangers messaged to ask what had happened, and the pressure nudged the board to finally agree to a transparent meeting. At the HOA meeting, the room was packed. Evelyn spoke first, measured and certain, saying I had broken the covenant of appearances, that the can was a provocation. I remember her voice as smooth, the kind that tries to make a personal grievance sound public-spirited. Then people spoke, some with bylaws memorized, some with tears. Mark told a story about a neighbor who paid for repairs others couldn't be bothered to do, and the room laughed softly because we'd all seen it. Elise, sharp and steady, unpacked the language of the rules like she was teaching someone to read in a new alphabet, and slowly the board's certainty began to look like a choice rather than an oracle. There was a moment during the meeting when Evelyn and I stood facing each other, and she said, "You made this about you." I replied, "It was never about me. It was about not being the person who cleans up the same mess every week." She flinched like she'd been named for something she'd been trained to ignore, the small daily harms that never seem to amount to a complaint until they do. The board voted to clarify the rules. It wasn't a knockout, it was slow work. They added language about durability, about negligent damage, about proportional fines. They didn't make everything perfect, rules rarely do, but for the first time, there was a mechanism that recognized when a pattern mattered. We didn't hold a parade. We had a potluck. Conversations replace edicts when people are tired enough to talk. The can stayed on my curb. It became a quiet witness. Teenagers would tap it to hear the ring and laugh, and then ask me what it was like to chain myself to a bin. I told them the honest thing. I didn't want the drama. I wanted boundaries. Sometimes I felt foolish, sometimes emboldened, sometimes I feared becoming the villain. But in the end, the change wasn't about the cement. It was about neighbors deciding to hold a common space with common decency. I learned that escalation isn't heroic, patience isn't always noble, and that small, repeated slights add up into a life you didn't ask for. Evelyn softened a little, which is human too. Power doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from a fear of being irrelevant. We rewrote the rules. We ate burgers, and the trash truck pulled up the next week and took the can without fuss. The driver nodded at me like someone who'd seen a lot of small wars and preferred quiet. So tell me, have you ever had to stand your ground over something that felt tiny but kept happening? Was it worth it? Who was right, the person who clipped the can or the person who made it immovable? Drop your story below. Argue a little, agree a little, and if this landed with you, share it with someone who needs reminding that sometimes the smallest things reveal who we really are.